The Wendigo of Black Ridge. Part 1. The Warning. You know those stories your parents told you as kids? The ones that kept you from wandering into the forest after dark? The tales of people vanishing without a trace in the mountain ranges of Northern America? Most of us laughed them off. Ghost stories, urban legends, folklore designed to scare children into obedience. But folklore comes from somewhere. For over 300 years, the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest spoke of something that lived in the deepest parts of the mountain forests. They called it Wendigo, not a monster from mythology, not a fairy tale, a warning, a real, documented phenomenon whispered about in reservations and passed down through families who knew the land better than anyone. The disappearances started long before we were born. In the 1800s, hunting parties would venture into Black Ridge National Forest and simply never return. Entire groups. Experienced woodsmen who knew the wilderness like the back of their hands. The official reports blamed bears, wolves, starvation, hypothermia. Accidents happen in the wilderness. People get lost. But the pattern was different. The remains, when found, were wrong. The bodies bore marks that didn't match any animal claws. Wounds arranged in ways that suggested hunting, planning, intelligence. And sometimes the bodies showed signs of having been partially consumed by something with an extremely particular diet. The locals knew. They didn't talk about it much. But if you listened carefully in the bars and diners of the small towns surrounding the forest, you'd hear the warnings. Don't go into Black Ridge alone. Don't stay out after sunset. And above all, don't go hungry. A starving Wendigo is a hunting Wendigo. By the time we heard these stories, they'd become almost quaint. Regional color. The kind of thing you smile about while sipping coffee at a mountain lodge before heading out for a day hike. We were young. We were in love. We were invincible, or so we thought. Part 2. Sarah and Marcus. My name is Sarah. I'm 25 years old, and I've survived something that most people wouldn't believe unless they saw it themselves. My boyfriend Marcus was also 25. He had the kind of smile that made people feel like they just heard the best joke of their lives, even if he hadn't said anything funny. He was an environmental scientist by training, a hiking enthusiast by passion, and my best friend since the moment we met. We'd been together for 4 years. We talked about marriage. We talked about kids. We talked about spending our whole lives exploring the world together. That October, we planned a 2-week expedition through Black Ridge. We'd done mountain hikes before. Colorado, Utah, Montana. We were prepared. We had top-of-the-line equipment, satellite communication devices, freeze-dried food for 14 days, and a detailed route we'd filed with park rangers. Everything by the book. The warnings we heard felt more like local flavor than genuine concern. Park rangers had never officially confirmed any unusual deaths. The disappearances were historical, not recent. And bears weren't interested in people unless provoked. We laughed about the Wendigo stories. We made jokes about it over dinner before we left. I wish we hadn't. Part 3. The trek begins. We started on a Friday morning in early October. The forest was just beginning its color change. Gold and crimson leaves hung heavy on the branches. The air smelled like pine and earth. The sky was clear. Felt perfect. The first week was everything we hoped for. We hiked between 15 and 20 miles each day, moving through terrain that grew progressively more remote and beautiful. We didn't see another human being after the first day. The isolation was exactly what we wanted. Just Marcus and me and the vast, wild forest. On the 8th day, we made camp in a remote valley surrounded by ancient Douglas firs that towered like cathedral columns. Marcus said it was the most beautiful place he'd ever seen. I agreed. We cooked dinner, filtered water from a pristine stream, and fell asleep listening to the forest settle into nighttime silence. That was when things started to change. Part 4. The first sign. I woke around 3 in the morning. Nothing dramatic. No sound. No disturbance. Just a feeling. That primitive instinct that something was wrong. Marcus was asleep beside me, his breathing steady and deep. I lay still, listening. The forest was quiet in a way I'd never experienced. Not the peaceful quiet of our first week. This was an empty quiet, an unnatural quiet, as if everything in the wilderness had suddenly decided to stop moving, stop breathing, stop existing. Then I heard it, a sound like wind through the branches, except there was no wind. The The trees weren't moving. The sound was different, almost like breathing. Long, measured inhales and exhales, as if something massive was standing just beyond the reach of our campfire, watching us sleep. I nudged Marcus awake. He listened for a long moment, then dismissed it as a deer or a moose, probably just passing through. He rolled over and went back to sleep. I didn't sleep again that night. By morning, the feeling had faded. The forest was normal again, cheerful, alive with bird calls and the rustle of small animals. I told myself I'd been tired, nervous, overtired from the hike. Marcus teased me gently about being spooked. I let him. I wanted to believe he was right. We broke camp and moved on. Part 5. The Trail. On the 9th day, we noticed something odd about the trail ahead. It looked like something large had walked through the forest recently. A path of flattened undergrowth, snapped branches, disturbed soil. It paralleled our route for about half a mile before veering off into thicker forest. Marcus theorized it was a bear. A big one moving between feeding grounds. He seemed almost excited by it. He increased his pace, trying to identify which direction it had gone. I told him to be careful. Bears are unpredictable. He laughed. He said that's why we had bear spray. That night, we made camp in a small clearing near an old fire ring. Someone had been here before. Recently, it seemed. The ashes in the ring were gray but fresh. Marcus found half a boot near the edge of the forest, about 50 feet from the camp. Just the boot. No foot. No indication of what happened to the person who'd worn it. He called it a loss from some other hiker. Probably fell in a stream and had to discard it. He kicked it back into the woods. I wanted to leave. Something in my chest was screaming at me to pack up and head down the mountain. But I couldn't explain it to Marcus in a way that wouldn't sound insane. So we stayed. That night, the breathing sound came back. Closer now. Circling. Not on all fours like a bear or wolf. The sound was too high, too far above the ground. Something walking upright, moving with deliberate purpose through the forest surrounding our camp. Marcus heard it this time. I could see the tension in his face in the firelight. He grabbed the bear spray and the flashlight. He shone the beam into the darkness beyond our fire. The light caught nothing. No eyes reflecting back. No shape. Just darkness so complete it seemed to absorb the light. We waited. Hours passed. The sun came up. The sound stopped. Marcus held me while we sat by the dying fire, and neither of us said much. By morning, I think we both wanted to turn back. But neither of us was willing to be the first to suggest it. We were young and proud and didn't want to admit we were frightened. That turned out to be a mistake that would cost Marcus everything. Part 6. The signs multiply. The next 3 days were the worst. Not because of dramatic encounters, but because of the gradual accumulation of wrongness. We found more items scattered through the forest. A sleeping bag torn to shreds. A backpack with its contents scattered like someone had raked their hands through it in a fury. Freeze-dried food packets opened but not eaten. A wedding ring lying on a rock beside the trail. We found markings on the trees. Long, deep gouges in the bark, running vertically for 8, 9, sometimes 10 feet up the trunk. The kind of marks you'd make if you were climbing. But these were too high for any human, and the spacing suggested something with a reach that no animal should possess. The creature was leaving us markers. Breadcrumbs. A path leading deeper into the forest. The forest itself had changed. The birds had stopped singing. We'd see elk or deer occasionally, always at a distance, always moving away from us with urgency. The small animals had vanished completely. We encountered an eerie silence broken only by our footsteps and that constant, distant breathing sound that seemed to follow us through every mile we traveled. On the 11th day, Marcus wanted to go back. He admitted it openly, and I felt a flood of relief. We'd turn around. We'd head down. We'd get out of Black Ridge and never come back. We'd laugh about this years later over drinks with friends, embellishing the story with each telling. That night, we decided to head out first thing in the morning. We barely slept. We packed our gear. We were as ready as we could be. We never made it to the trailhead. Part 7. The Hunt. It found us on the morning of the 12th day. We were maybe 3 hours into what we thought would be our final push out of the forest when the attack came. There was no warning, no sound, no movement in the trees. Marcus was ahead of me on the trail, maybe 20 feet, pointing out a ridge formation in the distance. I was checking my GPS to confirm our location. I heard him scream. Not a scream of pain, exactly. A scream of shock and confusion and something else. Something primal that I'd never heard from him before. I ran forward. I'll never forget what I saw. A figure was pulling him upward. Impossibly upward. Off the ground. Into the low branches of a massive fir tree. At first, I thought it was a bear standing on its hind legs. But bears don't move like that. Bears don't have that kind of reach. Bears don't make that sound. What I saw was tall, emaciated in a way that suggested something ancient and starved. Its skin was stretched so tight over its bones that I could see the structure of its body. Too many joints, limbs that bent wrong, a face that was almost human but horribly elongated, with jaw and teeth that seemed to extend too far, like something that had been stretched and distorted. Its eyes were the worst part, bright, aware, intelligent beyond anything I'd ever encountered. The eyes of something that knew exactly what it was doing. It was the Wendigo. Marcus was fighting, screaming, but the creature was too strong, too fast. It hauled him higher into the branches. I was frozen at first, unable to process what I was seeing. Then panic overrode paralysis and I ran forward. I should have run. I should have run immediately. Instead, I tried to help. Part 8. The Sacrifice. I grabbed Marcus's leg and pulled with all my strength. For a moment, I actually thought I might be able to get him down. The creature hissed. A sound like steam from a kettle, but deeper, more resonant. It turned its head toward me, and I felt my mind begin to fracture. No animal should look at a human the way it looked at me. With hunger, with recognition, with an understanding of my fear. It released one of Marcus's arms to swat at me. Its movement was faster than anything that size should move. Its palm struck my chest and threw me backward. I hit a tree 10 feet away and fell to the ground. My breath knocked out of me. Couldn't breathe. I was lying on my back, gasping like a landed fish, and the creature was pulling Marcus higher. He was still fighting, still screaming my name. But then he did something I'll never forget. Marcus stopped fighting. He stopped struggling. He looked down at me, and even from that distance, even through my shock and terror and confusion, I could see the clarity in his eyes, the decision, the moment when he chose. He deliberately pulled himself closer to the creature. He threw his arms around it. He attacked it, biting, striking, doing everything he could to capture its attention and keep it focused on him instead of me. "Run, Sarah!" he screamed. "Run! Go! Now!" The creature shrieked. A sound that shattered branches above my head and sent birds exploding out of the trees for miles around. It turned its full attention to Marcus, and for just a moment, its eyes were no longer on me. I ran. Part 9. Survival. I don't remember the first few hours clearly. It's all fragmented. Trees, rocks, streams. Running, always running. With that shrieking sound growing more distant but never quite fading away completely. I was hysterical. I was praying. I was saying Marcus's name over and over like a prayer or a curse. I didn't follow the trail. I just went. Downhill. Always downhill. I let gravity and desperation guide me. Branches ripped at my face. I fell multiple times. My equipment was gone. I dropped it running. I had nothing but the clothes I was wearing and a water bottle attached to my belt. The forest seemed determined to trap me. The terrain became more difficult, more maze-like. I'd reach what looked like a clear path and find it blocked by impenetrable brush. The sound followed me. That terrible hunting sound. The creature's breathing. The occasional shriek that echoed off canyon walls and seemed to come from multiple directions at once. I don't know how long I ran. Time became meaningless. I was driven by nothing but the need to survive, the knowledge that Marcus had given his life for me to have this chance. As night was falling, I reached what looked like a ranger trail. I'd never been so relieved to see a marked hiking path. I followed it until I found a small shelter, something used for emergency situations. I broke in through a window and locked the door behind me. I was safe. At least I thought I was. Part 10. The night that would not end. The creature found the shelter after midnight. I know that because I was watching the clock on my phone. The battery was low, and I was rationing it, keeping the screen dark most of the time. When I heard the first impact against the shelter wall, I turned on the phone to check the time. 12:17. The impacts came again. Not ramming. Not the kind of aggressive attack you'd expect from a wild animal. This was methodical, testing the structure, probing for weaknesses. The creature was examining the shelter with the patience of something that had learned that careful approach worked better than blind aggression. I was huddled in the corner, unable to move, barely able to breathe. The Wendigo walked around the shelter, circling it. I could hear its breath through the gaps in the wood. I could hear something else too. I could hear it making sounds, vocalizations. It was almost like speech, like it was trying to communicate. And then I heard Marcus's voice. Sarah, just my name, in Marcus's voice, coming from outside the shelter. It was a trap, an impossible, horrifying trick. The creature was mimicking him, but his voice was his voice. The inflection was his inflection. If I hadn't seen what that thing was capable of, if I hadn't watched it take him, I might have opened the door. The voice kept calling. For an hour, maybe longer. It cycled through different versions of Marcus. Marcus angry. Marcus sad. Marcus begging me to help him. It was torture designed specifically for me. The creature wasn't just hunting for food anymore. It was hunting for a reaction. For me to break. To surrender. I covered my ears and refused to make a sound. Part 11. The creature's hunger. Around 4 in the morning, the attack stopped. The voice stopped. The creature stopped circling. I was left in silence, broken only by my own ragged breathing. I should have used that time to rest. But I couldn't. I was too terrified to close my eyes. Too convinced that the moment I relaxed, the moment I let my guard down, the creature would find a way inside. So I waited. I watched the windows. I listened to every sound. Around dawn, I heard something new. Movement in the forest outside. Not the creature. Multiple somethings. I risked looking through a crack in the shelter wall. A pack of wolves had arrived. 5, maybe 6. They were circling the shelter at a distance, staying upwind, sniffing the air. They looked skeletal, starving. And I understood, in that moment, what was happening. The Wendigo had driven the predators away from the forest. It had eliminated the competition. It had made Black Ridge into its personal hunting ground. The wolves weren't interested in me. They were scavenging, looking for remnants left behind, evidence of the creature's other hunts. I watched, horrified and somehow relieved. The wolves were proof that I wasn't imagining this, that there was something real, something terrible, living in this forest. My sanity wasn't fracturing. My fear wasn't paranoia. The Wendigo was real. Part 12. The Descent. I stayed in the shelter for 2 more days. I didn't see the creature again, though I heard it occasionally. That breathing sound. That distant shriek that made the forest go completely silent whenever it echoed out. On the morning of the 4th day after Marcus was taken, I heard a vehicle. A real mechanical sound. An engine. I burst out of the shelter and stumbled toward the sound. A park ranger's truck was driving slowly down the maintenance road about half a mile away. I screamed. I screamed until my voice broke. I ran toward the truck, waving my arms. The truck stopped. A ranger in his 60s got out, his face moving from confusion to alarm as he saw me. I was filthy, covered in blood and dirt and torn clothes. I was barely coherent. I tried to tell him what happened. I tried to explain about Marcus, about the creature, about the Wendigo. He called for help immediately. He gave me water. He sat me down in the air-conditioned cab of his truck like I might shatter if he moved too quickly. Within 30 minutes, search and rescue teams were mobilized. They believed part of my story anyway. The part about Marcus going missing. The part about me getting lost and injured. The part that made sense as a tragedy that made sense. The part about the Wendigo, they treated with kindness and a certain professional distance. Shock. Trauma. The mind playing tricks when exposed to extreme stress and fear. I understood how it sounded. I knew what they were thinking. Part 13. The search. They found Marcus's body on the 2nd day of the search. They found it near where the creature had taken him, partially consumed and positioned in a way that suggested something intelligent had been studying it. The official investigation concluded that Marcus had been attacked by a black bear, a large one, larger than average. Bears sometimes act unpredictably, especially if they're starving or disturbed. Marcus had fought back. He died from his injuries. There was no mention of the unnatural positioning of his wounds. No discussion of the teeth marks that didn't match any known animal in North America. No acknowledgement of the other evidence I'd reported. I saw the files later. I hired a lawyer and got access to every report, every photo, every piece of evidence. The investigators had documented everything accurately, but the official interpretation had decided what they wanted the story to be, and they weren't going to let reality interfere. That's how these things work. Entities like the Wendigo don't exist in official reports. They exist in files marked with red tape, in stories told by locals to anyone who will listen, in the graves of hikers and hunters who ventured into the wrong forest at the wrong time. Part 14. After. I left the hospital after a week of treatment. Broken ribs, severe dehydration, lacerations and contusions across my entire body. Psychological trauma that required extensive therapy. The grief was worse than any of the physical injuries. I spent 6 months in a dark place. I was angry at Marcus for being gone. I was angry at myself for surviving when he didn't. I was angry at the rangers and investigators for refusing to see what I'd seen. I was angry at the world for containing something like the Wendigo and acting surprised when it killed people. But slowly, I found a purpose to my survival. Marcus died so I could live. Not by accident. By choice. He made a conscious decision to sacrifice himself so I could escape. The least I could do was live a life worth the cost he paid. Part 15. The warning. I'm telling this story because people need to know. Not just that the Wendigo is real, but that Black Ridge isn't some carefully curated wilderness area where tourists come to escape civilization. It's a hunting ground. It's a trap. And it's still active. More people have gone missing since Marcus died. Hikers, hunters, park rangers investigating strange reports. Some of them are attributed to accidents. Some of them are attributed to animal attacks. Some of them are attributed to getting lost and freezing to death. But the locals know better. They've started spreading the warnings again. More adamantly, more seriously. Because whatever the official story is, whatever the investigators write in their reports, something is actively hunting in those mountains. I consulted with indigenous elders who understand the Wendigo far better than I do. What I learned is that it's not a monster that can be killed with guns or traps. It's not even, technically, just one creature. It's a manifestation of hunger, of something that exists in the space between civilization and wilderness, between the known and the unknown. It feeds on human flesh, but it's sustained by something else. Fear, desperation, the knowledge that humanity doesn't own the wild world, that there are places where we're not at the top of the food chain. The Wendigo has been hunting in Black Ridge for centuries. It'll keep hunting for centuries more. Part 16. The final truth. I've been asked many times if I blame Marcus for our decision to go into Black Ridge. If I resent him for ignoring my instincts when I felt something was wrong. If I think we could have escaped together if we turned back earlier. I don't. I blame myself. I should have insisted. I should have been stronger. I should have refused to be swayed by my own pride and my desire to impress my boyfriend. But I don't blame Marcus. He was brave. He was selfless. He made a choice in the last moments of his life that saved my life. That's the person I choose to remember. Not as a victim. Not as someone killed by a wild animal. But as someone who loved me enough to give everything. I think about him every day. Every single day. And I think about what he'd want me to do with the life he bought for me. I think he'd want me to be brave, to speak the truth even when people don't believe me, to honor his sacrifice by living fully and fearlessly. So I'm telling this story to anyone who listens, to anyone who's thinking about hiking in Black Ridge National Forest or anywhere else in the deep wilderness. Be careful, be aware, and if you hear something breathing in the darkness, if you see marks on the trees that don't make sense, if you feel that primal warning in the back of your mind that something is wrong, listen to that instinct. Because the Wendigo is real, and it's hungry. Epilogue. Marcus Williams was a good man. He was kind. He was brilliant. He deserved a longer life. He deserved to help me change the world. He deserved to see the places we'd planned to explore together. Instead, he made sure I lived to tell his story. I'm doing that now. I'm telling it to everyone who will listen. I'm writing books. I'm giving talks. I'm consulting with research teams trying to understand what we're really dealing with in the wilderness. And I'm still planning expeditions, still hiking, still exploring, because I won't let fear dictate my life. But I'm also vigilant.
I'm careful.
I'm always listening for that sound, that breathing, that indication that something ancient and hungry is drawing close. Marcus taught me the most important lesson a person can learn. There are things in this world bigger and stranger and more terrible than we want to admit. And knowing about them, speaking about them, refusing to pretend they don't exist, might be the only protection we have. I survived Black Ridge because Marcus chose bravery over survival. I'm living because of his sacrifice. I hope his story, our story, helps someone else make it home alive. I hope it saves someone's life. That's how I honor him now. This account was compiled from interviews with Sarah Chun, conducted over a period of 3 months in 2024. All identifying details have been preserved at the subject's request, with permission from the families involved. Discretion is advised for those planning wilderness expeditions in the Black Ridge National Forest and surrounding wilderness areas.